Out of all the Stephen King books that I've read so far, this one has to be, the first that feels so disjointed. The flow is off. The rhythm is just all over the place. Immediately when I started reading this book, it was apparent that something was going on here. I don't know the background of how this book was written, but it just feels off from the beginning to the end. And that's how I would describe this book. It's just so disjointed. The beginning, we follow these two people, father and daughter, Andy and Charlie. These two people are protagonists, are being followed by, you might call them secret agents. They belong to an agency called The Shop, and we don't really know what's going on. They're being followed. They've been, fleeing for a long time. And I thought that this little intro would be brief, and then we would go into the meat of this book. But the first mistake that I think Stephen King makes is that this prologue, if you want to call it, because it is a prologue, this prologue where at the beginning where Andy and Charlie are being chased around in an airport and what have you, and they go, I don't know, they go on roads and blah, blah, blah. The chase scene at the beginning lasts for over 100 pages. That is unacceptable. I kept on reading, and I just couldn't believe that this was stretched out so long. It was terrible. Way too long. And when you really look at it, a good chunk of this book is just Charlie and Andy running along, just being chased by the people of the shop, and they just they're always on the move, they're always on the road, they're always anxious, and it's so, I don't even know what to call it. It's just, there's way too much of running around, being nervous, looking over your shoulder, whereas there should have been more focus on these two characters, their growth, their history, them meeting more people and such. There is a little bit of development, going back into their histories. My favorite moments were when they went to Andy McGee's family, cottage, whatever it is, and he, while they were hiding there, he was thinking about his, I think it father or grandfather, and how he spent his childhood, being there, learning how to hunt, blah, blah, blah. That to me was, one of the best moments of the book. But of course, after hundreds and hundreds of pages, Andy and Charlie finally get captured by the shop. And again, the problem is that the last chunk of this book is them being, held in the shop's facility, and it's just, again, it feels disjointed. I wouldn't say that it feels like filler, but it's damn near fillerish. Andy is being drugged. Charlie is being manipulated by this guy called John. And again, it just did not flow. The rhythm was not there. I wanted more from this book. Charlie's powers are interesting. I love the fact that when she unleashes her powers, it's like, the fire itself, which is invisible at first, the fire itself, after being released by her mind, it almost becomes like a real entity, a sentient entity. That was interesting. John Rainbird was a really interesting antagonist. I have to say, he is the only actual fascinating character that is in this entire novel. He has some sort of fascination with death, and when he kills his victims, he stares into their eyes to, I don't know, to get a clue, to understand something about life and death. So he is extremely sinister, a sinister person. And the way he manipulates Charlie is just cruel. But I didn't like how he ended up, how he died. After all this buildup, the main event happens in some shed where horses are being kept, and John Rainbird, after being built up as this, this sinister, grotesque villain, because he is the villain. I don't know. I think if I remember correctly, he just, I don't know. Andy uses his telepathic powers, and John Rainbird, he is momentarily stupefied, and he falls down and he breaks his neck or something. I really don't remember, but I remember that it was just a bit odd and lame. But I have to say this: the main problem that I think is so prevalent is Charlie McGee, our little Firestarter. This is the problem with, the problem with writing young children. You can either write them in such a way for them to be way more mature than their age, which doesn't seem realistic, or you can approach the situation as Stephen King has done in this book. And let me tell you, the problem is, when you're writing little kids like Charlie McGee, is that they are a bit, I wouldn't say superficial, but they are lackluster. Because, listen, I would say 95% of Charlie McGee's lines in this book are just daddy, daddy, okay? 95% of the times in this book, Charlie McGee, the Firestarter, when she opens her mouth to say something, the first thing that comes out of her mouth is daddy, daddy. Okay, she keeps saying daddy. It's understandable. She's a little kid. She's scared. She's being chased. She's being kidnapped by the shop. She has been separated from her father. So it's understandable, but from the beginning to end, with few exceptions, Charlie McGee only says daddy, daddy. Okay? And don't get me wrong, when she actually has some real dialogue on her hands, she is just, she stands out. She's smart. What I want to say is that I would have wanted more from Charlie as the person, and it's unfortunate that Stephen King chose to write her in this fashion of this little kid. It's realistic, but at the same time, I don't want to read about little kids going daddy, daddy for 500 pages, So this is the double-edged sword when it comes to writing young children. It's just such a thin line, because if you go one way, they are too mature for their age, they're too clever, and it's not realistic. But if you go on the other side too much, they're way too immature, and they have like 10 words in their vocabulary, right? I would have wanted something more from Charlie. It's unfortunate that for a majority of her screen time, she just can't stop bellowing, "Daddy, daddy." Okay, it is just unfortunate. But when she does shine, when she does speak her mind, etc., etc., especially when she has interactions with John Rainbird and afterwards, that is how she was supposed to be written from the beginning. But I have to give credit where credit is due, because let me tell you, there is a single moment in this novel that was absolutely devastating, brutal. Stephen King just came out of the woodwork and he just said, "Oh, you want some crazy writing? I'm gonna give you some." Okay, so Andy McGee has a flashback. He has one of his intuitions, one of his insights. So he hurries home, and the house is deserted. Charlie is allegedly at school or somewhere, but Andy can't find his wife. So he keeps on going throughout this house, from room to room, and his intuition is just going crazy. He is being bombarded by all sorts of sensations. Okay, and Stephen King just writes the tension so perfectly. And then the climax is that Andy finally finds his wife. She's dead. She has been killed. Her neck has been, I don't know, snapped like a twig, and she has been stuffed in some sort of closet, and the people who killed her, they stuffed, I don't know, a rag in her mouth. So the people of the shop came and interrogated Andy's wife, and then they killed her and stuffed her in a closet like dirty rags. And it was just the most brutal scene in this book. It's just so you can feel Andy's tension and Andy's despair when he finally discovers his dead wife. So that was the precise moment when Stephen King just flexed his muscles and genius was written on the page. Okay, so that is a well-deserved compliment. But here's another thing. I really, really, really wanted more from Andy's wife. She is interesting. She has a very important problem when they first meet in college, and unfortunately we don't get a lot of moments with her. She's so interesting. She has powers just like Andy. They got together. Both of them had powers, and because of that they had a child named Charlie, who has an even more interesting power. But unfortunately, her Andy's wife, I forgot her name, she is mostly not even a secondary character. She is the wife and the mother that was killed by the shop, period, end of story, which is unfortunate. Now, how this book ends, I'm not a fan of it, okay? Andy McGee, unfortunately, finally dies, and Charlie is on her own. And, you know, she is still being chased by the shop. They will never stop until she is captured and maybe eliminated, right? But the ending, to me, it was a bit, I don't know, I wouldn't call it necessarily goofy or naively optimistic, but she goes to the magazine Rolling Stones, and in an interview, her goal is to tell the people at Rolling Stone her story, what happened to her, what the shop did, etc., etc. And I guess the insinuation is that the story will come out, and oh boy, everybody will rise up to arms, and the government will just, oh shit, it got exposed. We gotta stop all of this. The ending to me is not good at all. Here's what I would have wanted. Okay, so Andy McGee, Charlie's father, dies. Charlie escapes. She's on the run. She's a fugitive. The shop will not stop until she gets caught and maybe gets eliminated. Instead of having just a few weeks or months go by, instead of Charlie finally going to Rolling Stones to tell her story, I would have preferred a time skip. I would have wanted to follow an older, wiser, maybe embittered Charlie McGee. Maybe her teenage years, 14, 15, 16, or maybe young adulthood, 18, 19, 20. That would have been something else. Because it would have shown her development and maybe her paranoia, right? Because, she has been on the road for so many years by herself. Now she is independent. She relies only on herself. And she doesn't get into contact with anybody because, the shop has killed all of her loved ones and friends, etc. So she doesn't want to put other people in danger. So because she's so isolated now, she has become a bit of a, what you might call it, off-putting, standoffish, right? Because of her situation. I would have loved to see that, and maybe, she meets other people along the way who have powers, and that would be interesting. And, we always have to consider, if she uses her powers, that usually ends up in disaster, but she kind of likes using her powers. It's this, sadomasochistic type of thing with her powers, right? So I would say that the last part of this book, no matter how thin, should have been a time skip where we follow an older, wiser, and maybe embittered, paranoid Charlie McGee. She's been through stuff. Now she is on her own and has been on her own for many years. And let me tell you, all of that isolation and despair and just thinking about her father being killed like that, that has taken a toll on her. Now she might want revenge. Now she might be a little bit cruel. She's not that little girl who just kept saying, "Daddy, Daddy." Now she's on a mission, maybe, right? So that's what I would have wanted. And listen, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Stephen King has written a sequel to Firestarter. I know there's this book, The Institute, with kids with powers. I don't know if Charlie McGee is mentioned there, but I strongly approve that this book deserves a sequel, and that sequel should be us following an older Charlie McGee and what she's been through and all of that trauma, what has happened to her, and hopefully if Stephen King does a sequel to this, hopefully it will be better than Dr. Sleep, because Dr. Sleep wasn't the best, okay? But that's about it. Like I said, out of all the Stephen King books that I have read, Firestarter just felt so disjointed, so scattered, so, wayward. I don't know if this book was written like, I don't know, not continuously, but, for months and months and years in between other projects. That's what it feels like. It feels like Stephen King wrote this while doing something else. It just seems so, there's just this dichotomy, this contrast. I don't know what you call it. There is no rhythm. There is no flow, right? And, I'm going to leave off with this theory because, it's interesting. So Andy and his future wife and 10 other people at college, they participated in this experiment where they received a special psychedelic drug, and that allegedly gave them powers, right? But I would suggest, and this is quite simple, is that those psychedelic drugs actually activated their dormant inherent shining. Of course, this is one of the main themes in Stephen King books. Okay, so the drugs did not bestow powers. The drugs simply awoke what already was there. Okay, the shining, and it's interesting that the other 10 people who had their powers awakened, they all died in mysterious or bizarre ways, accidents, suicides, uh, I don't know, insanity, what have you. And only Andy McGee and his wife, I don't know, remained sane, and they got together and they had Charlie. It's very interesting, and I can't really make the correlation why these two remained sane and enjoyed life, while the others, they just went insane and they all died, right? But that's about it. If you enjoyed this content, if you want to support your boy, I got a few books of my own on Amazon. The link will be down below. If the link doesn't work, because people have told me that the link doesn't work for them, you can search my name, Griffith Samsara, on Amazon, and you will find me. Thanks for watching. Keep on reading good books, and see ya.